J.J. Couey's insistence, and I think he's right, on calling them transfections rather than vaccines. Actually, J.J. Couey's insistence, and I think he's right, on calling them transfections rather than vaccines. Actually, J.J. Couey's insistence, and I think he's right, on calling them transfections rather than vaccines. Actually, J.J. Couey's insistence, and I think he's right, on calling them transfections rather than vaccines. Actually, J.J. Couey's insistence, and I think he's right, on calling them transfections rather than vaccines.
I don't care how you get there. I don't care what you do to get there. The goal is to win.
What time is it? Game time! Woo!
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist, catching you right in the middle of your daily hamster grind. And I hope that I can bring some hope, some good news, some obviously not so different news, but I do think it's still very important to stay focused on the main goals, which is to wean ourselves off of social media by building our own. That includes PeerTube and Soapbox instances that you yourself can also fund. Don't forget, I'm sorry.
We will not call autism.
Brian.
I don't like the word autism. He was vaccine damaged.
Brian, I understand. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Intramuscular injection is something that they never want questioned. Virology is a science they never want questioned. And public health is a reason that they never want questioned. And the way that they prevent it from being questioned is things like the autism spectrum disorder and what causes it. The autism spectrum disorder and what genes are behind it. Just like pandemics and what spike protein inserts are behind it, what furin cleavage sites are required, what things are these crazy scientists doing. And the same thing is being achieved there that was being achieved with AIDS. This is all a big trap. And if you don't understand why the cheese is free on social media, why the conspiracy theories are free on social media, then you will probably perish in that trap. It's the same illusion that Google has solved protein folding. It is the same social media illusion that keeps this biology hidden. Welcome to the show. If you're not following Housatonic Live, you're probably not watching me either, but if you're still unaware that this guy's work is important, please go there. You don't really need to do very much other than to go to his website, look at the research links, and start browsing. And then, occasionally you might be curious as to the guy who's archiving that and what he's got to say. This is another Substack I think that's very important to share because Scotland is one of the best places to see how the population pyramid was managed. It's ugly. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth will set us all free. Most importantly, the truth will set our children free. That's the trick here. We're trying to set our children free. Make no mistakes about it. This is not a game for points. It's not a game for money or share prices. All of this stuff is bullshit shenanigans that, yes, there are people that are doing that and interested in that and motivated by that, but those are useful tools. America and much of the Western world is being ripped apart from the inside on purpose, and as long as you keep believing it's the City of London or the Vatican or DC or bankers, you're going to be missing the big picture. This is about the species. And so we're talking about people that don't operate inside of the normal ideas of governance and inside the normal ideas of human society. And if you have been here for a while, you're here at the top of the wave. And otherwise, you might be a skilled social media user that has wandered into the wrong place on the internet. But fear not. You're actually welcome here, because ultimately this is a message for you. You gotta stay focused on biology. You've got to not take the ridiculous bait that is on social media. Do not underestimate how much of social media is effectively fake, false, or even artificial. And love your neighbor means breathing people that live near you. People that you see on the train, on the bus, on your bike, on your dog walk. These are your neighbors. And we've got to get off social media as much as possible. Repeat. And if you're listening for the first time and unaware, this is the voice of Jonathan Cooey. I'm chief biologist of Gigaohm Biological, coming to you live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have a long history of working as an academician, chasing tenure at various universities and institutions around the world, actually, including in the Netherlands and in Norway and in America. And you can find the stain of that work on the National Library of Medicine's website, PubMed. You can also find the smell of my more recent work very much diluted and distorted on a Substack called Woodhouse 76, run by and written by a group of traders to all of our grandchildren, but especially one in America by the name of Jessica Hockett. She's working with a couple foreigners that are associated with the group Panda. I also used to work for Children's Health Defense. I thought they were a bunch of heroes. It turns out that's a sabotaged organization that's run by a bunch of traitors. And I got to admit, I don't think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is clever enough, smart enough to have written the Wuhan cover-up book, although I did help with a lot of the citations in the text, and I did add quite a bit to it. Enough to rest assured that in history will always be recorded. For example, the paper between Sina Bavari and Alison Totura of Jeopardy fame. And I met Jay Bhattacharya as a fellow member and attendee of some Broken Science Initiative gatherings as the organization that's now known as Broken Science, spearheading the MetFix movement. And those gatherings were where I met Jay Bhattacharya repeatedly. And at one of those gatherings is actually when I was told by Jay Bhattacharya I should stop mentioning one Robert Malone, a horse breeder and emu farmer from Virginia, who many people on the internet and in the United States are definitely not aware of. But everybody who needed to be aware of Robert Malone was definitely aware of him. And now he's on the ACIP of our Honorable Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And something smells like bad fish. If you want to see where I first broke this out, you got to go to JC on a Bike. That's a YouTube channel. If you want to see it live right now, you got to go to JC in the Woods. That's also a YouTube channel. That was when I first started goofing around here. But this stream that's now on Twitch and on my own PeerTube, stream.gigaohm.bio, the way that works is that we have a bunch of people that are giving between $10 and $1,000 a month. There's only a couple people doing that last one. And as a result, that pays the rent. And that's how this works. Other than that, we scrape by. And all the ways that we are scraping by are found by at gigaohmbiological.com. So if you want to support this work and my family, that's where to go. And if you want to download the stuff that we talk about, you can go to that link stuff, which is found in lots of different places on that website. But first and foremost, at the top corner and bottom corner of the screen, there is a schedule we're going to start following really soon there. There's all the links to our channels, as well as all the links to the ways that you can support us, including our P.O. Box in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, where you can send cards, or a self-addressed stamped envelope where you can get a Velcro patch or some stickers for your car. And that would be, let's see if I can do this right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I don't have a producer or anything like that, so the music changes and stuff like that are all me. You'll hear the mouse click in the background every once in a while because I'm shifting things around myself. It's been a long time coming as a one-man band, much like Mark Kulak. We're just trying to do the best we can with the time that we have while taking care of our families and still trying to maintain some level of normalcy. And that's also why I start out with a Star Trek bridge a lot, because I do think we're in some kind of alternative timeline here. And if you think back to how we got here, an alternative timeline where we've just made one crucial, logical, navigational, assumptional error has brought us to a world where all kinds of things don't exist and all kinds of phenomena are assumed to exist, and motivating many millions of people's behavior even though they don't exist. And that's pretty extraordinary if you think about it. And the way that is sustained, unfortunately, is a mythology. And that mythology was already implanted in us as children in the course of our Biology 101 explorations. And our biological explorations as a kid inevitably led us to hear about germs and viruses and how viruses are endemic. And endemicity as both a process, meaning something that can go from a small quantity to being endemic, and that process of going to endemicity, becoming endemic, it also ends with endemicity, which is an endpoint, right? And so this is a very big myth. It's a very powerful biological concept. And if that concept is false, but assumed to be true, then all kinds of magnificent stories can be told. And that's more or less where anybody who was saying in 2020 that there are no viruses, that contagion is probably largely or all a myth, this is where they should have gotten at least in 6 years. And it's extraordinary that literally, actually, none of them have gotten there. And I need you to really comprehend that. None of the no virus people, the leaders who have insisted on defining isolation, purification, and culturing of viruses over and over and over again as a method of trying to tell us that the pandemic is a false narrative, have never managed to move on from there, and instead have continued to debunk or try to prove a negative over and over and over again. Because that's what they're essentially doing. X equals 0, and then they're proving 0 all the time. And those proofs, while many of them are valid, they don't offer an alternative explanation for how it is that so many biologists working in earnest seem to have been fooled when there is nothing there. And that is the absolute malevolence of that part of this script. That after 6 years, these people with books, some of whom had books 10 years before the pandemic, have never been able to get here. Despite admitting repeatedly at the beginning of the pandemic that there are no coronaviruses, they haven't proven this, but there are, bacteriophages, of course they are. Nobody's arguing there aren't bacteriophages. So they have not progressed, but instead their lack of progression has revealed that they are indeed sticking to a limited spectrum of debate, which must have been scripted. Otherwise, there's no way to explain their incredible accuracy, certainty, and flawless adherence to that script, likely provided by Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan and other people that we could list, because Claire Craig from the UK was involved in the 100,000 Genomes project over there. So there's a lot of people with the requisite expertise and connections to NATO and DITRA and this kind of stuff to know that they had to specifically script this out. They had to make sure that these people had a very solid sphere of bullshit that they could keep people in, that nobody would come anywhere near progressing to the point of being able to accurately debunk virology while still acknowledging what's done in these papers and what is purported to be done in virology as a field. And that's the magnificence of this. That's the magnificence of the script, because every time I end up making progress, it ends up being like 12 words. And so you can see why it's so necessary for them to be busy with so many books and so many podcasts and so many different groups of people discussing all of these things, when in reality it's quite easy. You don't need a lot of books. You don't need a lot of years. There's not a lot to learn if there was an irreducibly complex background and they just applied really shitty, absolutely awful excuses for a PCR diagnostic, which would have never passed the muster of any academic institution or academic journal as evidence of anything, even virology before the pandemic. That's what's so sad about it. And then we have all these pharmaceutical or retired pharmaceutical executives in our dissident movement telling us nothing about the fact that placebos would be the easiest, most foolproof way to pull this off. Instead, they spent 5 years telling us that the doses are different. And now they're going to spend another 3 years telling us that the doses were contaminated. And all the while, none of these people who are ignoring the opioid murders in America, none of these people are questioning the use of PCR as a test and as a diagnostic, because it's still going on now. Mary Talley Bowden has a PCR test in 2021 already that tested for 17 different viral markers. Every one of these people is scripted never to question the PCR, never to question virology, never to question transfection, or even call it by name. And we have been convinced that we are Ghostbusters, that the ghosts are real, and that these guys are heroes. And that's the trap that all of these people in the Trump movement, all of these people in the health freedom movement, that's the trap that they're in. And what they don't understand, and what no one will ever tell them, is that that trap was sprung at a specific time to be timed with a specific thing, and that is this little bump in the population pyramid. See how different it is, how the slope... Where's my mouse? See how the slope is different here? These bars are pretty stable right now, these old people up here. These bars are real stable. But in a few years, they're going to start to expand very fast, and that is a crisis for our socioeconomic infrastructure, where the availability of healthcare has been limited to exactly the amount we need available in order to tend to the population, and not many more. Ladies and gentlemen, there was an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality that was sculpted using murder and lies, and it was timed perfectly. And the timing does not depend on the background, because the background, in my model, is constant and irreducibly complex. You know, like if you needed words and you had a library, I guess you can find some words in there. And so it's not like you went into an empty warehouse and found a book laying on the floor and then came back a few years later and that book was in all the libraries in the world. No. You're already in a world with libraries that all have a lot of the same books in them. And so if you find a book in a library in Pittsburgh and say, wow, this is a novel book, This is a new one. Look, it's everywhere now. But what? What do you mean it's everywhere now? It was already everywhere now. The only reason why you could claim that is if everybody was both unaware of the libraries and also unaware of their contents. And that sounds like a pretty good description for what you and I and everybody knew about the population pyramid before the pandemic, and what we knew about the irreducibly complex background that people like Nathan Wolfe and Peter Daszak had been making a living pointing to at in PowerPoint presentations. And so the point is that that's why we have an anti-vax movement that is fake in America. And that's a bold statement to make, when most people on the Trump side are convinced that the anti-vax movement, the health freedom movement, is what got Trump into the office. What has resulted is a very successful placement of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at the head of Health and Human Services. And that's really terrible. Because that guy also seems to be woefully unaware that there was an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality that needed to be addressed somehow, even if it was just a lot more money and care. Or euthanasia. But of course, euthanasia is a word that implies informed consent. So calling people in COVID intentionally euthanized by hospitals is still not using the right language. And that's how you can know at this point that all of these people, all of them, even Joe Rogan, is either an idiot or on script. Because if somebody says intentional euthanasia, if you are a proficient English speaker, you should be like, dude, what does that even mean? Is that like military intelligence or jumbo shrimp? Like, what does that mean to you? Intentional euthanasia. What kind of shithead says those two words together on Joe Rogan, other than a scripted shithead? You see, she's a nurse. I don't even know if she's a doctor. Like, what is going on? No, she's a doctor. But what is going on when people, like, after 6 years have gotten nowhere? Unless they were given a script and told if you stick to it, everything is going to be great. And eventually, it'll pay off. Our man will be in the White House. You're going to get a position. Your business will... Whatever they told these people, ladies and gentlemen. And yesterday, I was talking about the opioid crisis and trying to put together a timeline like I've tried to work with everything else. It is sometimes the only way to try and process something is to put it into a longer time horizon context. You can't put Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s speeches in October of 2020 in front of people and then not realize that since that time that he spoke in Germany, his understanding of and his rhetoric about the pandemic didn't change at all. And if you just see the speech in Germany in October of 2020 alone by itself, it'll seem like, wow, he was way ahead of this. And so I think more important than ever, everybody's homework is always to make sure that before you send something forward to your family and friends, before you share something, you try to put it into context. And so I think
now what we do have evidence for are these.
We have right now in 2025 a guy who I will declare a traitor to Americans' grandkids, one of the worst Americans alive, is behind Robert F. Kennedy Jr., now running a beard. And he has been curating this narrative about the RNA and the dangers of it since 2020. The skepticism of the FDA and PCR methodology specifics since 2020. And that is because he's one of these narrative coordinators that knows enough about everything that he can do it. Maybe only Robert Malone and Jill Glasspool Malone are the other people who know that much in order to be able to do it. Because they've been following the narrative for so long. They've been a part of laying it down for so long. Again, Robert Malone's connections go all the way back to Robert Gallo and Murray Gardner and Inder Verma and all of these people who can be shown to be connected to a more than 20-year movement to pivot and make available the U.S. population and maybe the populations of most of Western society for the Human Genome Project. And a question of who is going to control that data, who is going to have the infrastructure and the tools necessary to process it, because at that time, 20 years ago, none of this existed. None of the idea existed, but none of the infrastructure, the collection, sort of pipeline, the remnant stream didn't exist. And they wouldn't have been able to use it 20 years ago, because the technology to sequence with high enough fidelity and quick enough, and then the technology and availability to store the data would never have been developed. But now, of course, we've optimized all that, right? YouTube can serve up videos all around the world as quick as a snap, which means that now they have the infrastructure ready to serve up genomes and serve up medical data at a snap to a machine learning algorithm. I mean, you didn't think that they were optimizing this sort of data serving infrastructure in order to make videos more and more available to everybody faster and faster and faster, did you? You didn't think that they were floating servers in big container ships in order to provide more storage space for creators, did you? So this guy is involved because this is part of the largest, most expensive project in human history, the Human Genome Project. It's basically a project that's so big and so scary in terms of its potential that they can use it to influence and maybe even bend the will of many, many people around the world, many, many institutions, many, many banks, many, everybody. The right people speaking in the right way at the right table with the right lighting can convince anybody of anything, especially if they were all given a lanyard before they went through and then scanned for weapons. And I can almost guarantee you that Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan have given briefings like that. Maybe on boats off the coast of Turkey. And so we also have more, let's say, mundane clowns in the show that don't really know what's going on, don't have the sophistication to know what's going on, but clearly must be traitors. You can't be from Scotland and not be fighting for the justice for all these dead people in Scotland that were murdered. You just can't be. That has to be the first thing on your lips, just like with Mark Kulak. The first thing on his lips, almost one of three things is going to come out. It's going to be the opioid crisis. The idea that 500,000 Americans were killed in 5 years and nobody gives a shit. But more importantly, it provides the perfect math for the COVID lie. And so, yeah, Mark's focused on that. Mark's got a reason to focus on that. And this shithead is from a place where there's a pretty easy thing to focus on, because unlike Mark, who's from a country of 350 million people and a whole bunch of shit to focus on, this guy's from Scotland, where everything was pretty fine until, well, immigration and COVID. And there are Substacks, particularly the one that I plug every time, the BO Phenomenon thing. That Substack should be promoted by this guy at least once a week, and he's never touched it because he's a shithead on Robert Malone's script. And that's clear here in this discussion between these two morons. Scripted morons, scripted bullshitters. And so being here is quite frightening. One of the things that I think we're missing is that the CDC is off everyone's radar. No one's talking about it at all. We've been fighting about the Surgeon General, and we've been fighting about who's on Rogan, and we've been talking about, dyes, and there's nothing happening. Nothing happening. And yet the CDC has a DARPA lady at its head. And if we do a little timeline for the CDC, it's actually kind of damning. Because in 2016, the CDC changed the way that that doctors are recommended to prescribe opioids after a many, many, many years of allowing doctors to prescribe opioids. Allowing it for many, many years for these pills to leak out of pharmacies, to allow people to keep a prescription going that they themselves weren't using, but somebody else in their family was using, or to sell them. And the penalties for this, the monitoring of this, the attention to this was nil. And then the CDC started to see people were overdosing on these pills that were being produced in mass quantities and being available everywhere, and prescriptions that weren't being controlled. And so they said, wow, there's a problem. We're going to have to crack down on the problem. And they keep using the word opioids in a big umbrella term that can describe everything from heroin, that can only be produced by poppies, all the way to fentanyl, which can only be produced by pharmaceutical processes. So we have this illusion, this mythology of irresponsible Americans and drug-addicted Americans and shitty doctors, I guess, or not. I mean, at some point, the thing you have to realize is that simultaneously with this recommendation, they changed the penalties for doctors and for pharmacists. And they told them that they are now going to consider it a crime to give opioids to people who don't need them, and you can't need opioids forever. And so they created a bunch of adults. They used them, and then they put them on the street. They put them in weed dispensaries. They put them in methadone clinics. Anywhere where there's a form of pain medication that's good enough to match or could possibly match that of the opioid prescription that they were on. Maybe that they were using. The thing about this that's most striking to me is that anybody who knows the history of science understands that in the early history of surgery, almost all these doctors were addicts. One of the greatest surgeons in American history was a cocaine addict and lost his license in one state and worked at Johns Hopkins forever after that. Made lots and lots of contributions to what we understand as surgery as a coke and meth a morphine addict. I think he was just a heroin addict. And there are lots of, probably in the world, functioning heroin addicts, because it's possible to be a functioning heroin addict. Cocaine addict is not so functional. You're not really that cool. But heroin is actually a drug, as I understand it, that can be responsibly used for a very, very long time successfully. And indeed, that was being done in the early history of surgery, because they tested it on themselves. In case that's not really, that's how this was done. So the concept, what we understood of this, right? The opioid wars, that's what Hong Kong is. And that's what Afghanistan was. And so all of this stuff is tied together, because then in 2018, of course, they have Donald Trump bragging about how he's cutting opioid prescriptions by 1/3 over the next 3 years. Prescriptions, that's presumably doctors and patients agreeing that this might be the solution. But he's going to cut back on those by 1/3, and he's going to step up prosecutions of doctors who prescribe them inappropriately. Again, creating an alternative market, because biologically speaking, people that have used opioids for a couple years don't have an alternative. They can't just go cold turkey for a little while. I mean, maybe there are people who can, but the vast majority of people don't have the biology necessary to be able to do that successfully very often. And that's not their fault, especially if they've been using commercial grade opioids, for criminy sakes. And so this is pre-pandemic. Then post-pandemic in 2022, it seems we might need some corrective measures. The CDC might need some corrective measures after 2019, 20, 21 numbers being record, and 22 is going to be even higher. Maybe we need some corrective guidelines for opioids. Does this sound any different than, well, you know, we there was a problem in 2020, a crisis of a coronavirus, but we responded like shit? Does that sound anything different than we gave guidelines and we changed the laws and oops, the opioid crackdown is backfiring? And so they set up America so that they were able to sculpt the murder, you know, use this. They sculpted it very specifically. And in order to do that, they needed to create that street market, that street demand, that illegal demand for pills. Call it a problem. We didn't realize that all these pills in pharmacies would be so valuable. We didn't know that people with these prescriptions could sell the pills. That's crazy. Wow, we didn't know that. And so, you know, you got to think they closed Alcoholics Anonymous at the beginning of the pandemic. They closed churches at the beginning of the pandemic. Recovery groups were not allowed to meet, but dispensaries and methadone clinics were still open. It's almost like a perfect storm to screw all these people over. You know, these middle-aged to young Americans and their families, just ruin them. Tough shit, right? It's frustrating to me, ladies and gentlemen, because we are there. We are at the stage where, you know, people like Nick Hudson will admit it.
You know, who's regarded by some people as sort of this kind of savant or idiot or something.
Savant or idiot.
These ideas are just too terrible and too incompatible with the biology that they learned. And in many ways, you know, they are.
No, and that's them. In many ways, they are. Now, notice, you can say my name just like Heather Haying said my name or Brett Weinstein says my name, but actually, I don't want you to say my name. What I want you to do is teach this very simple biology that only takes about 20 words and only requires 3-word sentences. That's what I want. Because that's what will save our grandkids. That's what will save the grandkids of Earth, is for them to reset their biological understanding of themselves and reset some of the parameters of the biological model of the world that they currently have in their head, because that model is broken. And saying my name doesn't do anything for that. Saying that COVID doesn't exist or there are no viruses doesn't do anything for that, because we must give our children an alternative model of the world that works. And this team of performers with costumes and effects, they're not going to do that. They're being paid to lie about why people died. All of these people are being paid fame and fortune in order to lie about why people died. That's it. That's how simple it is. It's murder and it's lies.
The FDA has led the world in advancing medical cures. But in recent years, that leader status has been in jeopardy. The FDA must modernize. So today I'm announcing a brand new program that seeks to do just that. It's called the Commissioner's National Priority Review Voucher Program. Through this pilot, companies will receive a decision within a month or two, as opposed to the typical 10 to 12 months for an NDA or BLA final application. At the core of this program is the ability of companies to pre-submit their application packet with essentially everything except the final clinical trial results. This program will also tackle one of the most common pain points drug developers voiced during a recent listening tour my team took: the difficulty of getting a quick question answered. A 15-minute discussion with the FDA can sometimes save drug developers months of guesswork.
And so what he's basically announcing is what Mark and I more or less predicted, was that somehow or another the FDA was going to be undermined or destroyed. And they were using language like burn it down to the studs and this kind of thing. But in reality, that's not required. In reality, you just have to put a stooge at the FDA who's going to do whatever they're told, or hire an assistant that will do whatever they're told. And then The front-facing version of the FDA is now a bunch of foreign meddlers who are going to do podcasts and read scripts in front of a camera. Not that dissimilar how Peter Marks did it during the pandemic. These are also just stooges. They are nothing more than the mouse in the mouse suit at Chuck E. Cheese's. And he is just telling you as you come into the restaurant that we're not going to require actually trial data anymore. We're just going to require them to fill out the application and give us a plausible mechanism by which they think it works and estimate what they think their experimental data will reveal. And we'll fast forward that application so that they can go on and start marketing their product in anticipation of the results of their experimental study and eventual approval.
Work, which is why companies in this new program will get more frequent communications. So who can get a national priority voucher? The key is in the name. The program will support U.S. drug developers who are addressing our most important U.S. national priorities, such as domestic manufacturing as a national security issue, addressing an unmet public health need, or supporting pandemic preparedness. It's worth noting that this new program is different from previous voucher programs and does not replace them.
The previous voucher programs, as far as I can tell, would be something like the EUA vouchers. The EUA vouchers are also the same kind of thing. Here's an approval for now, it's temporary. And then it's temporary hinged on a bunch of things. And so he's using these code words that only people who understand them, like Kevin McKernan or somebody like Robert Malone, who's sat on all of these committees for so long, would really understand. The American public doesn't understand that when he says voucher, that's like a code word that means a bunch of different things.
As a surgical oncologist, I'd often participate in tumor boards with a team of experts to consider hard questions in light of all the latest clinical evidence. Similarly, the National Priority Review Program will use a multidisciplinary team of experts for a team-based approach. We'll have more details as well as an application process coming out soon. In order to modernize the FDA, we have to keep innovating our regulatory processes. This new program is one step closer to doing that.
Now remember, the FDA's main objective, or let's say mandate, is it started out regulating the label. Essentially, what's on the label should be in the bottle. Claims made on the label should be verified claims, otherwise they shouldn't be able to be on the bottle. That's what the FDA does. Now, or that's why the FDA originally existed, let's say it like that. Another reason, well, anyway, I don't want to talk about that now, but it appears to be that phage therapy actually was also part of the motivation for modernizing the FDA back in the 50s and 60s, because phage therapy in America wasn't working as well as it was purported to work in Soviet Union and in Germany and other places, and in France. So that's an interesting part of this history that I bet a lot of you don't know, that I'm really, again, trying to organize and verify and double check before I start rolling out as part of our Biology 101, the new version of Gigaohm Biological. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be very eye-opening. Now, don't be disappointed, because actually this very same ridiculous pitch was also put out on a half-an-hour 3-man podcast, the one that I now have become just, it's awful. I had it muted, but I'm gonna put the sound on for a minute or two just so you can hear what it is. There we go. What it is they're doing. Because again, it's the same thing. They're gonna sit down and talk, and when they sit down and talk, he's gonna sit down and talk with this Jane Paul and McCary and Vinay, and listen to Vinay.
I know, I haven't really seen the two of you. We've all been in different places.
Yeah, I had the bio conference yesterday or the day before.
We've been to Stanford,
San Diego, Boston. We've been doing our CEO listening tour. We've now done 4 places, including the FDA, and we have heard a ton of things. So many, I think, consistent themes across all the things, but also at every single forum we go to, we hear new ideas,
So you see that
new ways
thing-
we could do a better job, and it's been a really productive listening experience.
And so they've been going around the United States on first-class flights, listening to CEOs, and the CEOs have had private meetings with them where they can tell them how they can make the FDA better for them. And of course, that's where this new voucher program comes from. And so in this video, he's going to tell you all about the voucher program.
They will share, and so they did. And, you know, we took a little heat, and I knew this was going to happen because we did it as a closed-door meeting. I mean, we might have had 70 to 120 people, depending on the city, in the room for it being closed door. We took, you know, and people, we all believe in radical transparency. But if you want someone to be honest and genuine in sharing their ideas, you have to create a safe space for them. And since we were not answering questions, we were not giving talks, we were not sharing new information from the FDA, we were listening. It was amazing how many people told us when they don't have to worry about their shareholders and their employees and investors and everybody else, how they just felt comfortable giving ideas, and they gave us a lot of ideas.
Yeah, and we can be transparent in what we're thinking and what we're going to do at FDA, but it's really not our role to force companies for telling their deepest, darkest secrets to the whole world. And in fact, by doing it behind closed doors, and again, we're just listening to what they're saying and writing notes and kind of saying back to them what we hear them saying.
Can anybody tell me what that dual flag is there? Because it's a blue flag here. I don't know what this blue flag is. It's really not blue and something. It's not like a Nevada flag or a Wisconsin flag or even a Navy flag. It's all blue. I don't know if there's a ring of yellow stars there or not. I can't really see it, and I'm going to show you a couple pictures afterward. I tried to take some snaps, and I couldn't see anything in the blue. It's not purple to me, but it could be purple, I guess. It looks blue to me. Anyway.
He learned a lot, and they talked about sort of frustrations they may face in all directions from...
Let me just make sure I point out what's happening here, because this grift has a very specific biological aspect to it that you may not be aware of. But Marty McCary is a surgeon, but he's very specifically a oncologist. So as a surgeon, he was cutting shit out, cutting cancer out. He's not an orthopedic surgeon who worked on people's ACLs. This is a cancer doctor. And that guy is also a cancer doctor. Worked for the National Cancer Institute. You know, where I think actually Lee Minyan's mother and father-in-law worked at the National Cancer Institute, which is, again, one of these very big biological myths. Not that cancer doesn't exist, but the idea that there's going to be some genetic or viral cause to cancer that, you know, you can chase down with NIH grants, because that's not how this works. And certainly that's not a genuinely honest way of pursuing the cures for cancer. Instead, that's an excuse to throw billions of dollars at the cure for cancer by blaming it on genes and viruses. And so you have an excuse to look for molecular signals and investigate molecular explanations. And so what is so malevolent about these two working together is that they are already, from a professional perspective, very fluent in the language of cancer trials and cancer therapies and cancer immunology and cancer hypotheses and failed cancer ideas. And so there's a Baskin Robbins of vocabulary that these two guys can bounce off of each other. You know, like if you've never played squash before and then you walked into a squash court and tried to catch the ball, two people that were playing squash could make you look like a clown. The ball goes too fast and it moves in a way that if you're not aware that the squash ball warms up, and as it warms up, it moves faster and bounces faster and all this other shit, then squash is going to be really like, even if you played racquetball, squash would be bizarre for you. And so if you're just a biologist but not specialized in cancer, then these guys are going to make you feel very humble And they're going to be able to very easily together create the illusion that these guys have a whole expertise that just makes you look like an amateur golfer, and these guys look like they have 3 green jackets.
You know, how they get their funding, the challenges they face with running their operation, and how FDA has made things easier and harder. And that's the other thing. We all got a lot of praise, too. You know, one person spoke about how the FDA is also doing a good job, let's not forget. But there are ways we could do better.
Thanks for throwing that in.
Yeah, right.
I think it's to the listening point, though. I think it's worth sharing the format in which you did it, right? You guys were truly listening because each attendee had, it was about 2 minutes, and they were on the clock, and they could just openly share what they wanted to say.
Because my voice was shot.
I think you're still recovering.
He's had a rough voice for this last week. But yeah, like a couple of the forums.
HHS department flag. If that's the case, good catch. Thank you very much. I won't make a big deal about it. Thank you. If you can send a link, that would be great. I'm not going to speed it up because I'm not going to leave it and go very long.
Every single person took a microphone and spoke from 1 to 2 minutes. In the forums.
More importantly, what you need to see is that this is an associate director. This is the director of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, and that is the head of the whole FDA. And they collectively have decided that a significant portion of their salary and, of course, other people's time, because they have an editor and a film, maybe the guy who films it is the same guy who does the editing, but there might even be more than one person that's holding a camera, that's running the sound, and then another person that's going to edit this down and put it on YouTube, make the cuts to camera A or camera B. That's not all done live. And even if it is, then somebody's got to be doing that too. So we are talking about 3 salaries, 3 administrators, bureaucrats, if you will, devoting. Now this is podcast number 9 that also gets put up as an audio file and also as a podcast, and also, you know, Twitter. They do this live on Twitter, on X. It's remarkable, ladies and gentlemen, if a government administrator or a group of them is regularly doing podcasts on X. That's, in a way, giving X government money, isn't it? Or giving something that belongs to the government. Why isn't the government just having a website where they stream the FDA show? And then maybe posting it on YouTube is possible, I guess. But the idea of going live on X with these things is, you know, first premiering them on X, that's unacceptable. Unless you are accepting the fact that the governance of the American population is now being done or manipulated on social media willingly. They're actually just doing it. And the Democrats and the Republicans, you know, the good guys and the bad guys, they're all doing it. They're all have acquiesced to this as being the inevitable future governance of society. That this is the new media. That new media is code for that. It's the new control mechanism. These people auditioned for 5 years on that new control medium, and their demonstration that they could herd cats successfully on that medium is what made them qualified to be put here, and specifically put here together. Thanks, Z-Dog.
Was just so big, we took a line and just let people go. But again, the whole thing was just letting people talk about frustrations they face. And of course, you know, there's certain themes that come across.
I'm going to let the computer rest here for a second. I think it's going to crashy crash.
Yeah, I had some FOMO because I didn't get to join the last few. So were there a couple of highlights of new themes you were hearing?
People talk about frustrations they face. And of course, you know, there's certain themes that come across it that we'd be happy to talk about.
Yeah, I had some FOMO because I didn't get to join the last few. So were there a couple of highlights of new themes you were hearing?
It's like a third of the feedback was a common theme in all the sessions. And I'd say 2/3 was unique and you know, very different. And they were very specific.
So many details, so much information here available. It's kind of hard to not see the radical transparency that's here. I mean, this is really radical. Oh, wait, is that the wrong? Oh, yes, it is. That's the wrong, it's radical transparency. It is radical transparency.
Specific ideas that were formative for us. These are things we can implement and act on, or run by our own staff. So, for example, we were just talking about the value of creating a safe space for someone to share their ideas. That's how we're doing it here. We will meet with physicians, scientists, reviewers, core staff at the agency. And we ask them, what ideas do you have? How could things be done bigger? Has there been some...
Okay, so that's the flag. If you say that that's HHS, I'll believe you. I know it's not the Freemason flag. I know it's not the UN, and I know it's not Nevada. What do I got back here? I think it's the Navy flag. It's not the Navy either. If it's HHS, I'm fine with that. I hope it is. If you can put a link in there somewhere where you found that, that would be awesome. I don't really care, though.
What a game it was for Woo Pig Suey. What a game it was for Gage Wood or Shohei.
Gage Wood. I don't know if you heard of Gage Wood, a pitcher from Arkansas. I don't know. The timing of the College World Series is like last week or the week before, which doesn't really make sense to me because I'm not a baseball player anymore, and so I don't really know how this college stuff works. Anyway, I'm told that this just recently happened, and it makes me feel really good to see a kid succeed. And the videos that I originally saw made it seem like this was going to be like a real big-headed, cocky kid, and then this interview on SportsCenter reveals him to be a real humble, badass young man, and I'm very, very proud to be an American and this guy playing an American sport like baseball so well. Watch this.
Tani returning tonight, plus we'll get you set for the NBA Finals. First things first. Just mentioned him a moment ago. Perfect through 5 innings was Gage against Murray State. 11 strikeouts. Feel it in the dugout. 6th inning.
He's not even that
Wood.
tall.
Gas.
It's
Connor
just gas.
Cunningham.
He's just got an arm, like a cannon.
The ground out.
Look at how tiny he is. Imagine if that guy was 6'4",
8th inning. Wood facing Dom Decker. Oh no. There goes the perfect game, but the no-hitter still intact. 3 batters later. Off speed. 8 innings pitched, 16 strikeouts. 9th inning, 1 out. Cunningham up. I mean, this is the 9th inning. Cheddar.
Hey, 97. That's heat.
Yep.
He's throwing 97 in the
19
9th inning.
strikeouts, 119 pitches.
And then he goes,
no
Arkansas, baby.
Gage Wood,
Arkansas,
the star,
baby.
without Danny Wexman.
Listen
you
to him.
just came over here, gave a hug to Connor Cunningham. Why?
Because I work out with that guy in the off season, and I didn't expect to see him here. I got to play against him. He got there a year late than from when I graduated, but I work out with that guy in the off season. He's a grinder. He works his tail off every day, and
it makes me very excited because I think at least one of my sons is a grinder who's just decided that, it makes sense to me that if I just work hard every day, eventually I'm going to get ahead of people and they won't be able to catch up because I'm going to keep working. And every day that he does more work than his age group, he feels like he's successful. And I can't fault that strategy at all. And I do think that more and more youth are starting to figure out that skills are worth developing, that skills don't come from genetics or as a gift. They are only achieved through hard work. And that's what you see here. And listen to what he says after this, because the hard work isn't just his.
He's my scramble buddy too, and I'm looking forward to working with him every offseason going forward. He's gonna be he's gonna get drafted one day. He's a solid shortstop. I think he was freshman of the year for them, so of course I'm gonna go over there and talk to my guy. I'm on cloud 9 and their season ended, but I'm gonna go tell him I love him, great job, and keep working.
You just threw the 3rd no-hitter in the history.
And what do you think that Gigaohm Biological is doing, by the way? Not to say that I'm some kind of big dude or anything, but I'm trying to lead by example because I am working every day. And it's not this stream that's my work. It's the books that I carry around with me. It's the notes that I'm taking. It's my obsession with this for the last 5 years that has resulted in me being surrounded by too many books to read, spending thousands of my Gigaohm dollars on the books that I think I need to have in order to read what I need to read. And I am going to do it until I can't do it anymore. And that's also why I'm dedicating so much time to getting in good enough shape to be able to teach from the biology court or from the basketball court, excuse me, because if this is going to work for me and my family, it's got to work for me and my family. It can't just be something where everything is sacrificed. And so I'm trying to find a way to turn it into something that just works for us. And I believe that because I have been working so hard every day, consistently for so long, and it's not just the red circles that I showed you yesterday, going to the gym every day and grinding on the floor. It's also getting up every morning and grinding on the internet and grinding on these books and grinding on this book and grinding on these notes and this outline. And it's not grinding on Substack where every time you post something, the AI can chatbot it away to 100 other Substacks with thousands more subscribers than you. What is the math of 40,000 subscribers on Substack? In my humble opinion, if you're charging $5 a person and only 1/10 of the 40,000 subscribers pay $5 a month, that seems to be a pretty reasonable living. It seems to be a pretty obnoxious living, to be honest. And yet so many of these people that purport to be heroes in America are exclusively, it would seem, only necessarily funded by Substack. Paul Alexander has 45,000 subscribers on Substack. If even 1/10 of those subscribers are paying, he should be ashamed of himself. Anybody that's written a Substack about me, positive or negative, I wonder how many subscribers Kevin McKernan has on Substack and how many of them are paid, and whether that 100-millionaire man living on Marblehead in Boston needs that many paid subscribers to Substack. What's he doing with that money? What's Jessica Rose doing with her money? What is Pierre Corey doing with her money? What is Jessica Hockett doing with her money? With tens of thousands of subscribers. When you only need 1,000 subscribers paying $5 a month to pay for a 5-person family in America. And these people have 10 times that. How do they justify it? How does Mary Holland justify taking a $250,000 salary for 15 years as at these organizations, or 10 years at the head of this organization? How does Del Bigtree justify taking his salary for that long, having accomplished nothing? Sorry, back to the good news.
Of this event, how do you describe your emotions?
I shouldn't have hit the guy. That's it. That's all I got to say.
When did you realize something special was happening?
I didn't throw a pitch out of the stretch for a while, and I was like, oh.
And your fastball, how did that feel to you?
It was coming out pretty good, it felt like today. It's nice and warm, so I was feeling pretty good.
Your family's here watching. We saw pictures of them and their
What I know is that the genetics of his rotator cuff ought to be looked at. That's for sure.
emotions. How meaningful have they been to you in your journey?
They're everything. They sacrifice a lot of time and money and everything to take me all over the country to play baseball, and I can't thank them enough. And even my high school coaches that are here right now, and my high school strength coach, I wouldn't be where I am today without Price Holmes.
Yeah, you're an Arkansas kid. You're representing Arkansas. What's this program meant to you?
It's everything, it's the only thing I'm focused on. We got to keep winning, we want the whole thing.
Hey, last one in this elimination.
I'm also focused. I want the whole thing too. And staying focused means you got to see them all. And Mark and I have had Peggy Hall on our radars for a while. I've been sending him videos. Sometimes he sends me videos. We've never really done anything about it, even though at the beginning of the pandemic, you can actually find podcasts from their church with Judy Mikovits and with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in 2020. So very clearly, it's all one malevolent show. If she were to have had Robert Malone on her show, then you'd already know, right? She's full of shit. Just like, You know, if Robert Malone was on Paul Cottrell's show, that would seem like really stupid, right? So then if Robert Malone went on her show, or if Paul Cottrell went on her show, or George Webb went on her show, it would be like, wait, wow, that's pretty dumb. I mean, that's pretty dumb if from the beginning of the pandemic she was already on, or kind of on, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s team, and now is one of those people that's on the internet kind of skeptical of Robert F. Kennedy. Maybe he's actually not anti-vaccine. I don't know. Jibby jabs and all these other silly things that she says. She's a fake. She's as fake as they come. And she was one of these people who was likely chosen because she was in a good position at the beginning of the pandemic, and maybe even encouraged to put herself in that good position before the pandemic to be ready for the start of it, just like a lot of these other people likely were. And so now I think what would be especially revealing is if she had somebody like Kevin McKernan on her stream, because then again, the guy who lied about Rixey, the guy who lies about the diffuse proposal on Peggy Hall's program would be extraordinary. Another interesting set of people that I think would be interesting if she had on there would be any of these people over here. Because of course these people over here were performing for a couple, 3 years in conjunction with Kevin McCairn in Japan, where also James Corbett lives. And so James Corbett being put in place at the beginning of the pandemic to make sure that everybody was afraid of Bill Gates, and James Corbett being promoted by CHD from the very beginning, doing podcasts with Meryl Nass. James Corbett is clearly a bullshitter, a scripted bullshitter, and he's very good at it, but he's a meddler on the exact same team that these people are on. It's all one show. Okay, I'm going to be back in a minute. I'm going to show you why it's all one show with Peggy Hall, because Peggy Hall blew it the other day, and so we've got to pounce on that, or at least we've got to make sure that people see it. And I'll be back in a second. Music break.
Young teacher, the subject of schoolgirl
think, but you can tell if someone's lying. You know, you can sort of feel it in
so
people.
badly, knows what she wants to be. Inside her, there's longing. This girl's an open page, bookmarking. She's so close now. This girl is half his age. Don't stand so close to me. Don't stand so close to me. Her friends are so jealous. You know how bad girls get. Sometimes it's not so easy to be the teacher's pet. Temptation
does have some questionable lyrics. You're not wrong about that. The reason why it does is because actually Sting used to be a school teacher, and it's actually, you can imagine he's a handsome guy, young guy, in a school, and girls get crushes on their teachers. And that song is about a girl having a crush on him as a teacher and it being a controversy for him. And so that song is about that. It's actually a very controversial lyrics in that song, and that's why. They are all bullshitters, scripted bullshitters on Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan's bullshit script. My name is Jonathan Cooey. Welcome to the back half of the show. We are now going to cover this little video that happened yesterday. It was actually a promotion of a previously recorded video of one of these super clowns right here. The reason why this super clown is such a super clown and why you can know that they are not real is the list is very, very long. But the primary reason why I think it's possible to know that they're full of shit is described on this screen here. So let me just change sizes here. So Tom Cowan had a book, a Chelsea publishing book in 2018, I believe. 18, not 17. And he talks very little about what happened during the pandemic, just says that there are no viruses, and he's very specific about it. And so he doesn't want to explain why anybody died. And that's the reason why this is a problem. It's okay to do that, I guess, in March of 2020. It's not okay to do that in June of 2025 and all the years between. Christine Massey is also a scripted clown. I'm not really sure if she knows the extent to which that she has been used. But her FOIA requests and all that shit was dumb. But she was also used as a puppet to play me while I was working at CHD. And often I would get emails from supposedly Christine Massey, who was insulting me and demanding that I send her papers about infectious clones. Perhaps the most damning evidence that this is one, malevolent show all on the same team with this jackass who supposedly lives in Tokyo is that for most of 2021 and probably a lot of 2022, this jackass, when he raised money on his live streams, would play a GIF where he referred to this as Bimbo Bailey with a picture of her with hot dogs in her mouth. And referred to her as Bimbo Bailey a lot. Now, the reason why this bothered me at the time was that in 2020, I had already sent her an email asking if I could interview her about the PCR test, thought she was being brave by speaking up, and she told me that she was having a baby and she couldn't talk to me, but she would contact me after the baby was born. And of course, that didn't happen. By then, they were busy with their own thing. I was being fired from the University of Pittsburgh and being meddled with in lots of ways, and it never really came back to it. But I started to see, without necessarily telling him already, but I started to see him as questionable simply because of his ridiculous take on Bimbo Bailey. I never told him that. I didn't say, hey, dude, like, she's cool. Like, at least she questions the people. I didn't defend her at all because, again, this is a guy who had my link on his website and I couldn't figure out what was going on. I just knew that he was streaming for 3 hours every night and that he was talking to some guy named Spartacus who seemed to know everything about the ACE2 receptor and all of its relationships to the physiology and regulation of fluid dynamics in the blood. I was bamboozled. I was fooled by the show that these people were putting on the internet. And from the beginning of the pandemic, this guy said that Andy Kaufman was the worst guy. And that later he pivoted to these guys also being terrible. He still has a meme of her, and her face is superimposed over a dune sandworm in his intro still, that also contains 5 slides dedicated to me. That guy right there in the middle of this screen. Kevin, worst case scenario, McCairn. Like yesterday, he did a stream. The intro is still the same. All the same bullshit music for like 15 minutes and still has 5 dedicated slides to me and 1 dedicated slide to her and a couple dedicated slides to Mark Bailey. But Mark Bailey and him did a very cordial and gentlemanly stream in 2022, despite the fact that he had been calling his wife a whore for a year and a half. Very cordial stream, moderated by Tim Truth. And so now it would be very, very extraordinary if, for example, in 2020, they did a podcast together right after the same podcaster interviewed Robert Malone and Ryan Cole and Peter McCullough, who would almost never be seen on a stream together again. Don't you see? Peter McCullough, Ryan Cole, and Robert Malone have been on only a couple streams together, and it was early in the pandemic, and then they split off to each herd their own group of cats. Once they had the narrative curation approval slip, the little badge where it says that I know the trick, I've got my script, they went on and led all the cats that they're leading now. Ryan Cole might go on to be the governor of Idaho. Maybe Peter McCullough will run for governor in Texas. I doubt it. And Robert Malone's on the ACIP. It's all one show. And you will see evidence for it because in 2020,
planning into worst case scenario.
In 2024,
the latest data tells us that we're dealing with essentially a worst case scenario.
And in 2025.
Hey friends, Peggy Hall back with you from thehealthyamerican.org. I'm taking quite a risk with this video challenging the germ theory. We're going to be looking at this book, Can You Catch a Cold? And the author, Daniel Voitas, is being interviewed by my friend, you probably know her, Dr. Sam Bailey.
My friend Sam Bailey. I'm going to promote my friend Sam Bailey and take a risk by challenging the contagion myth on YouTube.
Stop lying! Stop lying!
This really reveals Peggy Hall to be nothing but an absolute awful traitor to American grandkids. Awful. She's a traitor to all the whatever the American idea is. And make no mistake about it, they are using charming accents and attractive people from other countries to make sure that Americans always feel behind the ball, that Americans always feel shame, that Americans always feel responsible, that Americans will ultimately turn on themselves and their country and the idea of what the country represents and burn it all down. That's what they're trying to trigger. That's what they want the Democrats to do to the Republicans and the Republicans to do to the Democrats. That's what they want the whites to do to the blacks. They want it all. And the only way they're going to get it is to break it all down. And these people are in on it. Because after 6 years, after publishing a book, it is impossible for them to still be where they are with such aspecific details about what they think really is going on in the world, what really happened in the last 5 years. And instead, this stupid, feel-good, shitty music from a terrible documentary and these terrible, overdone accents and these frickin' fake people.
Please enjoy.
This was important because it hasn't been done before. So there aren't any published papers anywhere in the scientific literature that document all of the failed human or any of the human contagion experiments.
So he's now going to prove a negative by showing you that the contagion experiments that are recorded in our history don't do what they purported to do. So explain to us what cholera is. Explain to us what yellow fever is. Explain to us what... See, this is the problem, right? They are not offering you an alternative. They are going to, as limited as possible, challenge something that will never free your grandkids because it will still leave them trapped in the basic bad biology 101. Listen to this shit music and understand that there's no way to take anybody seriously if they put music like this behind their video. No way. It's by definition bullshit.
For contagious illnesses like the cold or flu or measles or any of these diseases. Like, that's something that's immediately apparent when you start looking at the literature, and for good reason, because once you do that and you look at the results, you find that the overwhelming majority of experiments that were done trying to prove contagion or transmit illness from sick people to healthy people failed.
And so they are not going to explain to you how they've overcome this to produce the rest of the literature that they call virology, which is what? Ladies and gentlemen, if you've been watching this show for a while, you should have already screamed at the top of your lungs to the screen. They can make recombinant DNA and put it places. You silly shithead. So if the contagion experiments didn't work, how are they doing virology? And they're not going to tell you that, because if they did, they'd have to admit that they could have told you that in 2020. These people are traitors. They are performers, and they are doing it happily. Anybody who is actually at the brick wall should have some difficulty controlling the anger that they experience every day when they start to swim in it. When their face starts to scrape against the bricks again because they've decided to read into this more. When your face starts to scrape into the bricks again because you've decided to try and figure out a little bit more about transfection and transformation and molecular biology and phages. You get a little angry after a while because it's like, why in the hell am I the only person who's ever had the wherewithal to do this work? It's exactly the same reason why a friend of mine, Mark Kulak, will often come on stream, and it seems like he's yelling at his viewers, just like I yell at my viewers. Because look, if you were trapped alone where we're trapped alone, you'd be pissed too.
Time and time and time again.
Daniel Reuters is a naturopath, nutritionist, and physical therapist with over 10 years of clinical experience, as well as being a lecturer at many of Australia's leading natural medicine colleges and universities. In 2020, with the onset of the COVID-19 era, Daniel started questioning much of what he thought were scientific facts and embarked on a new phase of private research. He launched the Humanly platform and has featured discussions with many of the world's foremost heterodox thinkers in health and science.
Even using the word heterodox says that she's scripted, and scripted by the same shitheads that script Brett Weinstein. I never frickin' use the word heterodox to describe anything because I'm not scripted, and I think that word is frickin' stupid.
After facing professional difficulties for publicly sharing his research findings, Daniel decided to forge a new path where he would not submit to scientific dogma or other people's rules. As part of this journey, he has just published an incredible new book titled Can You Catch a Cold? It is the culmination of several years of focused research and takes its place as the most...
What does that picture mean? Give me a break.
Most comprehensive account of human contagion experiments ever seen. This one-of-a-kind book is a must-read and reveals many of the buried and inconvenient clinical experiments that go against germ theory and the mainstream claims. I had the honour of writing the foreword for Can You Catch a Cold, and will also be recording an audiobook version later this year.
Well, thank you so much, Dane, for agreeing to come on.
She's gonna do an audiobook. Awesome, boy. They might be able to use that to torture people in military operations. You could just put that on full blast. Oh my goodness. So one interesting thing to note here is that apparently her house is painted black on the inside, which is just says all kinds of shit about you as a person. Like, and I'm just going to say it right now, I wouldn't be friends with somebody who had the taste and concept in their head to paint their frickin' house black. That's wrong. That's so stupid. Like, I don't even know how to exclaim how dumb that is, other than you're so pompous and full of yourself that you change the color of your rooms like every few months because you just pay people to do it. Otherwise, that's just so frickin', it's so bad. Like, who does that?
With me, it's so exciting to hear about your new book.
Ha! Navy blue, says the chat. You know what? You're totally right. I had one wall in my childhood bedroom that was painted navy blue, like midnight blue. And then I had one wall in my bedroom that was cloud wallpaper. And on the cloud wallpaper, I had put glow-in-the-dark stars so that when you had the room, you had, dark sky and light sky with clouds. And when you turned the light off, you had dark walls and frickin' glow-in-the-dark stars. Now, I don't see any glow-in-the-dark stars, and I don't see a frickin' wall with wallpaper with clouds, and I definitely don't think that this is navy blue. So you're right. Navy blue would be totally tolerable, even usable and creative. But black is just, wow, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to come and speak with you about the work that I've been doing, and forever indebted and grateful for your support and Mark's support, Sam.
It's honestly, the feeling's very mutual because I think we've been on this almost synergistic path together.
Now remember, I have an email. I contacted her in 2020. She said she would contact me after, when she started podcasting again, but she didn't. And instead, she was part of this group of people that regularly opposed me. Actually, her husband was part of the 5 people that got together and talked about me in 2023 and about infectious clones and how stupid it was or something like that. They are all on the same team as Peggy Hall and Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan and Claire Craig and Nick Hudson of Panda and Jonathan Engler of Heart and Jessica Hockett on Substack, and all of these people. They're all on the same team. And they're all responsible for this bullshit health freedom movement that somehow influenced enough to, I guess, put Robert F. Kennedy Jr. somewhere that doesn't matter because everybody else that's underneath him is complete shitheads anyway. Most of them have 2 passports. What's going on? Other than some absolutely awful, malevolent show that you would never see if you weren't on YouTube or X or Rumble.
It feels like with even our books, and so I really would like to start from the beginning with you, to go right back to where it all, your journey, I guess.
She is attempting to be cute. This is all a well-scripted, well-rehearsed 5-year, this is 5 years worth of practice. This character trying to be the little shy, little cute girl, whatever the shit she's doing. It looks like she took some of the Botox or filler out of her lips.
To how you became a naturopath, so for people that don't know your background.
I guess I was pretty unwell as a child.
I have such a hard time smiling when I do these shows because it's just not fun to be here. But it's very fun to be where they are. They're very happy and comfortable where they are. Their journey together.
And we went to all the different doctors, and they essentially said, he's making it up, he's putting it on. And I got so sick I couldn't play sport anymore. I loved playing soccer, and I had to give that up because of...
So the reason why he became a naturopath is because as a kid he was sick and nobody could cure him.
How unwell I was, and then we went to a chiropractor, and he did some dietary changes and some various other techniques, and I got better. And from that point on, I wanted to be a chiropractor throughout my sort of teens, but they didn't offer chiropractic in Brisbane, in the city that I live in. So I found the next best thing, which was
So he changed his diet and somebody cracked his back and then he got better? Is that what I'm supposed to assume here?
Naturopathic medicine. So I studied that and did my undergraduate degree. I think I started around 2006 or 7. And when I finished that, I went and did a postgraduate degree in human nutrition, went and started another master's degree in Chinese medicine, which I'm still yet to complete, and a whole other bunch of postgraduate qualifications and things. I was fortunate enough to get approached by a couple of colleges when I first graduated to do some tutoring, and that progressed into lecturing, and eventually I became a senior lecturer, which is a position I held for many years at colleges and universities.
So he didn't ever really do any research. He's a teacher, which is fine, but it's very different than my background, for example.
Around the country, and eventually got to the point where I realized that most of what I was teaching was nonsense and I couldn't ethically do it anymore. So I gave up my job in mid to late 2022. And yeah, the rest is history.
The wake up point.
2022 is pretty late. That's like Asim Malhotra late. I'd already been officially dismissed for 2 years and off. I mean, it's odd, right? In 2022 is when I got hired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Interesting late timing. So why promote this guy? You know, why are we?
What was it? What happened to you? Was this before 2020? Was it after? What kind of?
He just said it was 2022. You dipshit. Are you listening?
What? Can you talk a wee bit more about that?
I always knew that something wasn't right with medicine, I guess, and health from an early age.
But that's not COVID, dipshit. When did you find your principles? She's asking you a specific question, not a general one.
My parents were always looking at medical alternatives because the medical system failed them. And I saw that it worked for my parents and then it worked for me. And I got thinking, how is it that medicine can't help people, and the people that do get helped by natural medicine, they're sort of dismissed as quacks and it's all, nonsense. So that left me asking a lot of questions, and it is one reason why I did get into the natural medicine field. But I think in 2014, I realized that something was a bit of a miss, more so than what I had already realized throughout most of my life by that point, and went down quite a rabbit hole with a lot of different things. And
listen to how a-specific he's being. Is he saying that he figured out that vaccines were bullshit? Listen to how a-specific he's being. Now remember, I'm trying to be as specific as possible when I say that intramuscular injection is just dumb until somebody tells me otherwise. And I only just started this journey very recently, and I don't have a book. I'm not being promoted by the great Sam Bailey, who already also has a book and a following of millions of people. I'm not being promoted by anybody, even the guy who I helped write a book, who's now at the Health and Human Services Secretary of the United States of America. These people don't seem to be concerned about the fact that the former scientific advisor to the now Health and Human Services Secretary of America says that there is no COVID pandemic. They're doing their best to ignore me since they did that one stream. What you need to see here is this is a American promoting foreigners who are curating the narrative about how people died. They are curating the narrative of how people died in America and not talking about the murder that they know exists because we've told them. They know exists because they are being employed not to talk about it. These people come from Australia and New Zealand, where the lockdowns were ridiculous and only possible because of the murder committed in America. Otherwise, they would have never, maybe they would have, because they're such weak humans, weak people. But America would have never tolerated the lockdowns had they not murdered people in America. Maybe the Australians and the New Zealanders would have tolerated lockdowns with comic books. I don't know. But the point is that these people are complicit in murder. Complicit in murder and this charade that they're enjoying their collective experience together. And wow, isn't it funny how we have the same journey? These are absolute criminals.
2020 came around. I actually heard Dr. Andy Kaufman and Tom Cowan.
Andy Kaufman, Tom Cowan. Wow, surprise, surprise. They're the ones who woke this guy up. Are you kidding me?
Talking about this thing called terrain theory and that germs don't cause disease. And it immediately resonated with me. I think sometimes when you hear...
I don't think that Australian men as individuals are weak. I definitely don't think Australian Sheilas are weak in general. I'm just trying to say that what they did in Australia, where they prevented people from going from province to province, even if they had family across the border, that their lockdowns included not being able to go on dog walks and shit. Like, yeah, America did some stupid stuff. Like we put sand in skate parks and stuff like that. And then we took drone videos of it and we chased people down the beach. But in Australia, they were throwing people against the wall to make sure that they wore masks. They were using tear gas and shit. I'm not saying they're weak. I'm saying that they couldn't have stood up to this because of the fact that they were murdering people in America, and these mother effers were lying about it. Or were willing to get on a script that still lies about it. When the whole reason why the vaccine rollout was so successful in his country of Australia was because they were willing to murder people and lie about it in America. These people could turn the whole narrative around if they just said to themselves, you know what? The only reason why they were able to lock us down was because they murdered people in America. They lied about the opioid epidemic in America. That's why they were able to lock us down. That's why our Australian politicians should be in jail. But is this guy campaigning for justice? Absolutely not. Do you see why it doesn't work? Do you see why this international story doesn't work when you realize that the same way out applies to everybody once you call it murder and lies, and you just have to find out where they were done? And these guys could say America and Scotland. These guys could say the opioid crisis and basically murder in Scotland. They could say that, but they've never done it. Instead, it's like selling books and giggling and practicing looking cute.
Yeah, the truth, you know that it's the truth. There's something inside that just clicks. And when I heard them talking about this, I knew it was the truth because I'd actually been exposed to this idea in the early days of my undergraduate degree. My lecturers in immunology were talking about this concept back when you used to get taught some of the real natural medicine. It was still around back then. And at the time I thought, yeah, it's interesting, it makes sense, but I was looking at it more from like a terrain germ theory paradigm. Like there are germs, they do cause disease, and you've got to build up a strong immune system to protect yourself against these things. And I kind of dismissed the idea of terrain theory as the sole concept altogether, because I thought germ theory had been...
No, I don't need to play this anymore because you see the point that I was making, right? It's one big show. Even if this guy's just a unwitting participant, his lack of progress is specifically facilitated by the jackasses that he's surrounded by. And so it only takes a few of them to be in on it. It only takes a few of them to be in on it, and then the rest is history. It's in a team of performers. They're all on the same script. And if you do the thought illusion, the thought experiment about why no virus position is a trap, it's number one, because the genetic background noise is an irreducibly complex noise. And it is largely composed of bacteria and phages, both of which are definitely real and could explain any contagious phenomenon that occurs. And they will not tell you that. They will not tell you that we can manufacture large quantities of DNA and it will do biological things. They will not tell you that we can use that DNA to manufacture large quantities of RNA that will do things. And they will not tell you that a very tiny quantity of that DNA would be a perfect PCR positive. So far, we have no magic tricks, we have no special biology, we have no real special things needed in order for a pandemic to be faked. It's all right there. And the no virus people have never touched any of these points in 6 years. They will also never tell you that most virology is not fake. It is just using cell culture and exposing them to quantities of pure DNA as a proxy for what they call the natural phenomenon. That's why the term infectious clones is so important for them to have found already, for them to have explained already, because it buoys their position that coronavirus has to be a mythological biological phenomenon. But they have been so imprecise and so inaccurate in their progress in understanding this biology and their ability to teach it better that they're still stuck in the same place that they were 6 years ago. And in fact, the only evidence for coronavirus pandemic potential is the biology of remdesivir, because it works on the proofreading of coronaviruses, and that is so damning. And then the final thing that's damning is that intramuscular injection must be pretty dumb then if there's no contagion, right? So why wouldn't we say that from the very beginning, instead write a book and talk in all these vague terms and giggle behind the camera? It's just bullshit. If you believe what you say you believe, you haven't made the progress in action and in words and in understanding that you should have made unless you are a scripted actor, and that's what those people are. Ladies and gentlemen, it was always a background signal, and there was always an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality. That's the truth. You can see it in the population pyramid. That's why they have liars in place to lie about it. It was a national security operation from day one. Trump's shooting was probably a theater. The mystery of the novel virus was certainly a theater. And HHS Secretary of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is certainly a distraction, because America's health is not a priority. America's health data is the priority. And you can see Trump didn't submit a budget. That's how big of a show this is. Thank you very much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. RNA cannot pandemic. Intramuscular injection is dumb. Transfection in healthy people was always a crime, and the population pyramids are a real problem that you need to understand, and understand it as a big biological signal that they misconstrued as spread. Thanks for being here. See you again tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday.